Okay, so where do I begin? Welcome to my latest project, I guess if you want to call it that. This is Myakka Head Airport in Florida. It's a little ways away from Alaska, that's for sure. But this is one project I did not want to pass up. Long story short, I started this project back in the FSX days, way early on when I was just beginning development and learning how to 3D model. And I never ended up finishing that project. I think I got like two of the hangars done, and then I moved on for God knows whatever reason. But here a while back, a video sparked my interest. And this is off a channel that admittedly I don't follow very close because I'm not a car guy, but probably a lot of you have heard of this YouTube channel, and it's Cleetus McFarland. He ended up buying this airport, and it just so happened that it popped up in my feed, and of course I had to end up watching it because it's like, oh, I know that airstrip. That's kind of cool, right? So after watching that video, of course, anybody in the flight sim space that follows Cleetus McFarland started posting about it. And I was like, I wonder if I should circle back and work on this airstrip. Because it'd be like circling back to something I never completed, right? And actually have the chance to do the airstrip justice. But there for about a week, I was like, no, I don't really know. I got the California strip going. I'm trying to finish that up. I've been working in Alaska mostly. I don't really have the library set up for a Florida airport. And then I end up making the hangar. And it spiraled down from there. So here we are several weeks later now. And I have pretty much all of the buildings at this airstrip done. Now, when I go into most projects, I go in with an idea of what I would like to achieve in that project, and usually I kind of have a picture of what the end result is going to be. This project was very spur of the moment, and I really don't even know what I'm doing still to this moment. I'm just going with the flow. I've sat down and started modeling stuff. I've got the hangars done. I'm getting an idea of, maybe the direction I want to go as far as some of the details I want to add in. But at the end of the day, is it going to be, am I stopping at the airport, or am I going to cover more things in the region? And that I'm not quite clear on just yet. Now, it has been made very clear to me a while back, and it's not been that long ago, maybe a week or two back, that Orbix published a variation of this scenery, Myakka Head, over at the Orbix store. And it wasn't an Orbix official airport, it was a developer that published it through them. And I'm not one to get into what should we call it, a shit slinging competition about add-on developers. I don't do that. It's just the wrong thing to do, and I encourage anybody to sit down and at least try to develop for the simulator. Um, However, at this point when the scenery came out, I was already, maybe a week, 2 weeks into development of this airstrip. And I want to make it very clear from the start here that Orbix releasing this airstrip as a payware, and I think it's like $6.99 or $6.49 or something like that, US dollars, is not deterring me from completing this project. My goal with this project is to have an accurate representation, or as accurate as I can possibly make it, within reason, of course. A little asterisk there, because I'm not going down to every last little freaking weed in the grass, right? um, but I want to have a very accurate representation of the airport, and I don't want to make it just it's it's Cleetus McFarland's airport thing. It's the way I'm approaching it is this is Myakka Head Airport, the same way that I would approach it with any other airstrip that I do. I think there's a big difference between doing an airstrip because you have a passion for the airstrip and doing an airstrip because you follow somebody on YouTube. And I don't want to turn it into just that because I follow somebody on YouTube. I'm building this airport because I want to see this airport's legacy live on in the simulator. So to do that, I want to have within reason, the most accurate representation of the airport that I can. And I don't want to just skimp and throw in a bunch of, default static objects. I want to have it live up to, even if it doesn't come close to one of my Alaska airports, because let's face it, my libraries that I've developed over the last several years here have been very much tailored towards Alaska. So Florida, it doesn't really have a lot going for it. I have some basic vegetation I made for it. I have some other vegetation that I can reuse in this region that kind of fits in. I'm going to have to add some new stuff. I don't have any 3D trees for the area, so I'm leaving, at the moment, everything default trees. Which, depending on how Flight Sim 2024 turns out, may actually play into my favor. There's been a little bit of speculation by their preview videos that there may be 3D trees by default. So by leaving my trees default, maybe it just ties in a lot nicer, in that transition period. But at the end of the day, that's something I'll have to decide on, is if I do want to bring some 3D trees in, and how, I'll have to acquire those or build them or whatever. But for the time being, this airstrip, as you can tell, is a lot more simple than as compared to my Alaska airstrips. And that being said, I haven't decided on how I'm going to go about releasing this yet. I haven't decided on if it's going to have a price point. I haven't decided on if it's going to be freeware. I've almost played around with that. I've kind of played around with the thought of maybe doing this as a freeware on PC, and then maybe bringing, because you can't, again, asterisk, you can't have freeware, quote unquote, on Xbox, even though there are freeware packages. It's just very restricted to what can be uploaded as freeware. And usually full-blown products like airports and aircraft is not an option. Even libraries or little things like that. Like libraries and some tools have weaseled their way in somehow. And, yeah. Lost my train of thought there for a second. It's still early. Anyways, what was I saying? Track the camera view before that gets too off tilt. I guess what I was getting to is that I'm considering, like, if I do go that freeware route, and mind you, this is still very up in the air. I've moved more into the payware realm now as my skills have progressed, and I like to keep that payware thing, but I also have to consider, with the Orbic scenery out, is it going to be worth it for people? Because people have already bought the Orbic scenery. Is it going to be worth it to people that they're going to want to pay for another version of this scenery? Or do I want to make it accessible to as many people as possible by making it freeware? And bringing, let's say, this airport and Bear Island is one I've been thinking about to Xbox or a package for cheap. You know, that's an option that I have, and that's one way I can get that scenery over on Xbox. Now, it's a little bit of a gray area, and it's not necessarily a gray area as far as me being able to list it on Marketplace. I know I can do that. But it's a gray area in the fact that, and this is what it always is boiled down to with any freeware that anybody has requested the developer to put on Marketplace, is do we feel right about doing that by taking a freeware and bringing it over to Marketplace, where it does have to be posted for PC, even if it's going on there specifically for Xbox? Are we okay with bringing that over there for a certain price point? And the lowest price we can go is in US dollars, of course. Everything's US dollars with Marketplace, but $4.99. That's the lowest we can go, right? So I feel like Xbox is to a point where they don't mind paying for stuff like that, but do we as developers feel right about doing that? And let's say Microsoft opens it up to freeware next year or later on this year. We all know that's probably pretty far off, especially with the ingestion process and how slow Marketplace is at getting updates out. But what happens if that does happen later on down the road? Well, now we've charged people for something that should be freeware, right? Do we feel okay doing that? It's all stuff we gotta contemplate, really. But anyways, for the time being, I am mostly just focused on this airport. I'm focused on making models, texturing models, coming up with what models I need to have next. And as far as release and price point and all that goes, that's going to be one of the last things I think about. But during this whole process, of course, I have to sit down. I have to consider all of that. But let's get away from talking about price point and let's actually talk a little bit about what I've been working on at this airport. And as I've mentioned before, and as you can see, I have been doing mostly buildings so far, and I'm taking a little bit different of a route than what I would normally do for scenery. Now, if you're familiar with any of my Alaska airports, you know that over the years, my skills have progressed quite a bit. And I've really gotten into a routine where, I model in Blender, I paint over in Substance Painter. And when done right, that gives me the opportunity to make some really, really nice looking and grungy textures, right? But the downside to doing that is that everything is packed onto a texture sheet. And to get a texel density, which is good and a high resolution and crisp, you either need to have a large texture resolution, 4K, or sometimes it's like even 4K doesn't cut it, and we don't want to go to 8K. So, you break it off into multiple texture sheets of 4K, and you get the textile density up that way. But then you're sitting there thinking, okay, well, once you compile to DDS, it takes, a little over 10 megabytes for an albedo channel or albedo texture, and, double that for a normal. And then, of course, you have the comp. So you're looking at quite a bit of texture memory for each 4K texture. And if anybody's familiar with Xbox, or if anybody has followed my optimization throughout the last couple of years here, you'll know that Xbox is a problem. When you're bringing products to Xbox, you have to make sure those products are highly optimized. And the number one killer on Xbox is texture memory. So I wanted to go a little bit different, go about this project a little bit different this time, knowing that the two main hangars at this airport and most of the other hangar-esque things I have made use pretty much the same materials in their design. I decided to go with tiling textures this time. So none of this is painted in Substance Painter. This is all done in Blender with tiling textures, including dirt and grunge. Is just another tiling detail texture. And what this has allowed me to do is it's allowed me to texture all my hangars with 1K texture sheets. So 1024 by 1024, which then allows me to have really high pixel density on my textures. And the best part is even once it gets over an Xbox, and Xbox downgrades those textures, right? But those textures should still be a lot more crisp than what they are, or what they would be if I were to paint this building in Substance Painter. And it's using a fraction of the texture memory. Now, the downsides to that are, of course, it's not painted in Substance, so I have less control over grunge. There is no baked AO, so the interiors of the hangars are a lot brighter. It's just relying on the Sim's ambient occlusion casting to give it that bit of depth. And you can see that if you look above the I-beams there, like at the peak of the roof, how it's casting shadow up there, or if you look in the corners. But the real-time ambient occlusion of the Sim, it only does so much, right? So that is a couple downsides to doing this process. But I got to think of it from a performance standpoint, and the fact that I know it's going to run a lot better. I'm doing it really cheaply by using vertex paint to bring out the colors and like the metals. So each one of my metal like I-beams and stuff, this hangar's not a good example, but the metal I-beams, like over in the other hangar, there's like a bare metal, there's this the red painted, I forget what the term for that is, it's like a fireproof coating, and then you have like the blue and stuff, right? This is all using the same material, but using vertex paint for the colors, so it's done real cheaply. It's not like I'm pulling multiple materials to make this happen. So this is done in a way that is very good for performance, but maybe not as good for visuals. And it's, like I said, just something that I did want to play around with for a project, and this project drew the short straw. It was time to try it out. So those of you that do end up grabbing the scenery, you know, whatever means I release it, definitely I would like to hear some feedback on what you guys think about that. If you like the tiling style and appreciate the performance, I'm most interested myself to see how it performs on Xbox. Or, you know, if you want to see, you know, more Substance Painter stuff, like how I textured my stuff for, you know, Alaska, or let's even say like a hybrid method, right? Like a good example of that is the hangar at Fort Crosby. That's a hybrid method between tiling and Substance Painter. Everything's outputted to a texture sheet and is baked in Substance Painter. And then I come over top of that with detail textures to bring in like paneling and stuff. Now, the reason I did not do that for this hangar, of course, is one, it's going to add more texture memory, and two, it's, I mean, these are pretty big buildings, and the whole point of using the hybrid textures is getting away with using a smaller resolution texture sheet. And I just don't think I'd be able to pull the textile density out of it without using at least a 4K. And at that point, I might as well paint the entire thing on a 4K texture sheet, because we're going to be, you know, way above the texture memory that we're at right now. But anyways, there's still quite a bit to do on this project. This is nowhere near done. I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a preview of what's been going on behind the scenes, because I know I've been quiet here for quite a while, since my last Alaskan project. And quite frankly, you know, I ran into a pretty bad case of burnout there for a month or so, and wasn't really doing anything. So this was kind of the project that pulled me out of that burnout. And it's what's been keeping me busy for the last several weeks now. So, as always, I do have a development thread up over on FS Developer. I also have one up on the Microsoft Flight Simulator forums. If you guys know anybody that has been flying in and out of this airport since the Cleetus McFarland video came out, definitely drop them those projects and let them know about it. And let them know it's going to be let's just say for now, an affordable barrier to entry for something that's going to be fairly high detail. Like I said, don't really know what I'm doing as far as release right now. But all I know is I'm not trying to be first. I'm just trying to do it good. And if that means waiting for Cleetus to put out a couple more videos, so be it. But until then, I'll be working on the things that I know that I can do well, based off the information I have. And while we're here, we'll end the video on my favorite little weekend project. They had to be done. Just a couple crab trap buoys on top of a PVC pipe. Florida runway markers. Florida man strikes again. Anyways, guys, thanks for following along with this project. I am your resident scenery creator, sometimes video creator, rarely, RotorNet44. And, yeah, I'm out. We'll see you later.